Hello, everyone. My name is Cristiana Valpires. I'm from Care, and today I will be moderating this conversation. We gave the title Queering Harm Reduction to our topic today because our aim is to discuss the extension and the expansion of the social justice agenda of harm reduction to include the priorities of queer people who use drugs. This session is organized in the scope of the project queercare, a partnership co-funded under the Active Citizenship Program, managed by Fundação Carlos de Gulbenkian and Fundação Bissaia Barreto in Portugal. This project is coordinated by Care, a Portuguese NGO specialized in harm reduction in the drug field. In a partnership with Abraço, that was the first organization in Portugal created to support people infected by HIV. Gentopia, a trans-feminist NGO, and Rotin, an NGO based in Iceland with experience in providing trauma-informed care for women who use drugs. The main aim of this project was to create knowledge, competence, and tools to promote queer responsiveness in the health and social support to people who use drugs. Returning now to our topic, historically, harm reduction emerged as a community-based and peer-led response to take care of those who were excluded from the conventional health and social services and who were disproportionately penalized by the social stigma related with their behaviors and conditions. In particular, harm reduction emerged as a reaction movement and a compassionate community care response for those infected by HIV/AIDS pandemic and who were heavily excluded from the social sphere due to ignorance and degrading stereotypes. It also emerged as an alternative to abstinence-only programs for people who use drugs. Citing Jay Hogan in an interview for Volteface in 2022, the emergence of HIV/AIDS and the way in which the queer community choose to care for one another popularized many of the harm reduction models still used today. Here we highlight the distribution of free condoms and syringes, non-judgmental information, outreach care, and also a strong advocacy agenda to destigmatize those who were disproportionately impacted by stigma and drug prohibitionism. For this reason, and from a sociological historicism perspective, we can say that the history of harm reduction is queer. In fact, we continue to see queer-led harm reduction innovations in the drug field. For example, in responding to chemsex-related risks and the inclusion of safer space policies in harm reduction, and also awareness initiatives in sex-positive and drug-positive environments. Today, we have here with us three folks who are leading the process of queering harm reduction, and we welcome yourselves, and we are very grateful that you join us today. So to begin our conversation, I suggest you introduce yourselves and tell us who you are, what are you doing, and yeah, welcome to here. Maybe you, João, can begin.
Thanks, Cristiana. Yes, I'm João Florencio, and I'm currently a professor of gender studies at the University of Linköping in Sweden, and I mostly work with sex media and sex cultures. So I guess what unites everything that I do is an interest in trying to figure out how people imagine themselves and create themselves at the kind of intersection of sex media, of pharmacotechnologies, and kind of sex practices. So I'm looking at culture. In that context, I've done quite a bit of work on chemsex, always from more kind of theoretical or speculative rather than kind of social science, because that's not what I do. But to think about, what chemsex may and chemsex and drug use more broadly may do for queer people that makes them come back to it, right? So what is the positive thing that people take out of it?
Thank you, João, and welcome. Matilde, do you want to jump?
Yes, thank you for the invitation. I'm Mathilde. I'm born and raised in Normandy in France, and I'm currently based in Berlin. I'm passionate about music, electronic music, and I've been working in the music industry for the last 5 years. Unfortunately, my experiences in nightclubs and festivals often has been encountering a lot of harassment and discrimination that were not talked about in the scene, or like the organizers were not taking responsibility for it, and there is no collective responsibility for it. So together with my best friend Domitille Raveau in 2018, we co-founded the Paris-based NGO Consentis, because we believe that nightclubs and festivals are cultural places for expression, experimentation, and emancipation. So we help organizers to implement prevention measures at their events and raise awareness around the topics of sexual and discriminatory violence while promoting consent and harm reduction practices. So basically, how do we do this? We offer trainings to music collectives, nightclubs, festival staff, and booking agencies to equip them to organize safer parties and work environments. We also organize awareness campaigns, talks, and workshops to fight against sexual and discriminatory violence among partygoers. And we also curate playlists to give visibility to underrepresented artists and promote inclusivity in festivals and nightclub lineups. So we work closely with cities in France, like Paris and Nantes, and we work everywhere in France and are part of several European projects.
Nice, Mathilde. Thank you for joining us today. And here we have Mar, our colleague also from queercare, that is joining us today also. Mar.
Hi, thank you for the invitation. And my name is Mar, and I'm a pharmacist. I work at queercare on the drug checking service. But I also collaborate with several queer collectives here in Lisbon and in Berlin as well, doing harm reduction, queer care, and awareness. Basically, I was going to parties from this collective, and we started organizing our own harm reduction service. This was made easier because we opened the venue here in Lisbon, do-it-yourself, semi-illegal venue, where we run our own parties, and this allowed us to create our own service, but based how awareness can be done not only as an external team coming there for the event, but also regarding the whole venue, how the whole venue can be constructed around this. And another interesting aspect of this is also how it became almost of a community center, and how awareness and queer care spreads not only in the party, but on people's lives beyond the party and these regularities. Yes, this is basically what I do. I also collaborate with queercare, producing materials, doing research, and in Rebus Care Corner, we also do a lot of workshops and talks and in these topics, not only to increase drug literacy, but also to share experiences, have input from people, and try to create this space, this network. Yeah.
Thank you, Mar. So we have here a beautiful, a group of people with different experiences from academia, from research, also from outreach services, from, with experience in safer space policies, also on festivals and clubs. And yeah, now I will probably jump to the first topic of discussion. I prepared a script to guide our conversation today. And here it is. Drug use among queer communities tends to be overlooked. Traditionally, it is not considered in the primary monitoring tools to analyze drug use trends and in drug science. And for this reason, we don't really have a lot of information regarding the specific drug use patterns among queer communities. There is also another risk that is because queer communities are quite heterogeneous, and sometimes there is this tendency to consider that a specific pattern represents all the community, and this is not true, of course. However, evidence also demonstrates that these communities tend to use more drugs when compared with their cis heteronormative peers. And in some cases, they experience more risks and harm that sometimes are related also with their queer trajectories and also with the experiences they have in affirming their identities and affirming, their living projects. Some data that consider the lived experiences of queer people who use drugs demonstrate that they tend to experiment and adopt specific drug use patterns and experiment with less traditional drugs. At this point, it is relevant to highlight that drug use patterns are not homogeneous, of course, among queer folks, but because this is also, as I said before, a very heterogeneous group. However, considering that queer experiences and queer subjectivities have in common the fact that they are transcending the hegemonic gender norms and the compulsory heterosexuality and traditional family model, I would like to hear from you and considering your particular set of knowledge and experiences. Why and for what purposes do queer folks use drugs? This in terms of their motivation, but also the function and potential of drugs for their living and for their subjectivities. And, the one that feels more willingness to begin, of course, can begin responding.
No, I mean, I can say something. I'm not gonna start all the so I started this one, so now starts the next one. I was thinking about this question earlier because you sent it to us. Yeah, I mean, I think like straight people do drugs. They just they drink a lot, right? Uh, and so I was thinking about so the premise that maybe queers do more drugs, and I was thinking maybe it's a question of um normalized drugs and not kind of normalized drugs, right? Because growing up, everyone drank a hell of a lot around me. Uh, so I think queer people do drugs because I guess drugs are feel good, and I think it's really important to kind of stress the feeling good of or the pursuit of pleasure or whatever it is. That shouldn't be like uh, devalued as a justification for anything, right? But then I was thinking, maybe because it's kind of I work with culture, so I'm looking at that from a kind of a cultural point of view. Just like everyone drinks alcohol, or like most people, when I was growing up in Portugal, everyone drinks alcohol because it's part of a culture. So I think, in my case, growing up, as a a little kind of fag boy, I think it's drugs that are introduced to people as part of a kind of a set of cultural norms and rituals and patterns that shape the culture that you kind of feel is yours, or that you want to be part of. Just like with any other thing, right? So I think the history of drugs in queer drug use leads itself to kind of queer culture being perhaps more open to drugs or more okay with drugs, and people then are introduced to them as they kind of grow into that culture. But it's also, I think and this is not my research, but there's quite a lot of interesting research about then the value that drugs have for queer people, either in terms of experiencing in terms of like sex or in terms of identity, relationships to the body, reshaping and rethinking the body through drug use. That is really important for us in case of trans people, non-binary people that often talk about drugs as something that gave them a tool to rethink their body and what their body can do and where their body can go. So yeah, so I think there's those higher stakes with queer drug use, because we're kind of all either in search or like trying to make something new of ourselves, and drugs can help that. Sorry, I spoke for way too long. I'll shut up now.
Mar or Matilde?
Yeah, I agree with what you say, Joe. I think, yeah, there's definitely like a pleasure-seeking approach in the queer community when using drugs, and that it has been helpful for a lot of queer folks to experience their identities and like try their boundaries. And I also want to say, as Chris said also in the intro, that the LGBTQI plus community faces like societal and cultural obstacle that their heterosexual counterpart typically don't face. And of course, this obstacle like discrimination, hate crime, rejection from family and friends, and loss of employment or housing. And now like also an increasing number of laws that are limiting freedom of expression and restriction on how trans people can be themselves, and yeah, like the criminalization of drag shows and banning gender affirming care. Like I think queer folks experience a very high social control, and they are required to perform and mask to fit in cis heteronormative norms, and it plays against self-expression and is so strong over the expression of emotions. And these social pressures can cause queer folks to abuse prescription medication and other substances in order to like numb their feelings of anxiety, depression, and social isolation, as well as to experience their emotion and expand their feelings and explore their identities. They are like both parts. So yeah, they're like, because we don't know how to exteriorize our emotions, because we are just required to mask and perform. This like mind altering substances feel like a helpful tool to be able to exteriorize and explore. So we need like activities where self-control is reduced and emotional expression is possible. Yes, maybe Mar, you want to complete?
I resonate with what you both said. I was also thinking that at least what I see in the pattern, like the drugs that the queer community uses the most, I think it also reflects a bit like the whole queer culture as well. Like some of the drugs that are more typically associated with sex also appear then in parties, because of course it's the same people, it's their friends, it's people around them. And these are some drugs that are not so common, like in more normative contexts. And also what you were saying now about these more aspects of not fitting in, masking, and self-medicating in some way, I think it also makes a lot of sense. Also, there's a big overlap queer identities and other conditions, from neurodivergence to other psychiatric conditions. So I also think like a lot of people also use drugs as a coping mechanism or as a way of processing what they feel, especially in a context where you don't have access or you don't feel welcomed or you don't feel seen by the traditional medical institution support system, etc. So I think that's also a resource that a lot of people use. And even from a third perspective, at least from what I see in my group, there's not really so many meeting points and community points that are not like nice events in this sense. Like there's not so many like queer activities on places where you feel safe and seen and surrounded by peers in your daily life. So maybe that also ends up resulting in this drug prevalence more than alcohol, you know, because it's nightclubs, it's parties where substances are more common. It's not like going to a cafe 5 in the afternoon and having a beer at the counter. And I don't think it's necessarily problematic, any of these aspects. Like you were saying, like alcohol is a drug. A lot of the drugs we use used to be or are still medicine used in medical field, since for GHB, MDMA, amphetamine, all of these were or are until now also used. So I also think that this view of substances, what is a drug, what is a medicine, what is a socially acceptable substance to have at the counter of a place is also very flexible and changes throughout the day. So yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah, totally, and so that's why. So for instance, when I was I was like try to shy away a bit from say from I totally agree that people will somehow kind of many people will self-medicate to cope with traumatic experiences or just bad experiences, fucked up experiences as queer people. But I always shy away from either using like self-medication or like coping, because we kind of almost like intimated to use that narrative, and then we look around at kind of straight culture, or to use those terms, we look at straight culture, everyone is on antidepressants and everyone is on Valium, but they're not self-medicating or coping. They are just being looked after by a health system. And so there's this kind of, if you are being drugged by a healthcare system, you're not being drugged, you're being cared for. But if you, through community knowledge and kind of intergenerational community knowledge, things that we know, that we teach young queers, how do you do this? How do you look after yourself? That's a form of knowledge that allows us to care for one another, but also to kind of medicate one another in a way, right? So I think that's interesting that there's these two levels of discourse. One institutionalized discourse about health and care. The other one, something that is seen as, just kind of wild people going at it. And so we talk about ones like coping or self-medication. And then the next step on that is like internalized homophobia or whatever it is. So, I mean, yes, sure, but everyone is doing that. My mom on Valium is not different from eyes feeling shit sometimes and wanting to do something, right? So I think ultimately we're a society on drugs, but only the ones who are not on the right drugs are like pointed at. And so it's kind of, I think there's actually quite a lot more in common between, queer and straight people at that level, apart from the fact that they do the right drugs, the good drugs. We do the bad drugs. I'll just say something else and I'll shut up again. What Mathilde said about, what did you say? losing your autonomy or on drugs, something like around undoing yourself or losing. Uh, I think you said something about that, and I think that's actually really. I mean, what you say about autonomy?
No, not autonomy, just that we need to exteriorize our emotions.
Yeah,
Because we are
yeah,
controlling, we want to exteriorize. Yeah, we don't
exactly.
know how to exteriorize our emotions, and drugs feels like a great tool.
And I think that, but I think that to me also kind of reads as this issue of, it's if you socialize in such a way that all these different expectations and norms are literally imprinted on your mind, you can understand how if you find yourself, actually, I'm not fitting, it says something that doesn't compute, uh, actually drugs can be a great path to release those structures that are kind of, or to kind of open some space in your mind to like figure out your own structures, right? Your own patterns, the ways you want to shape yourself and as a subject, right? um it's like it's horrible growing up, right? And it's really hard to get rid of those things that you realize are not for you, that you carry with you. So I actually like that idea of like, you actually need to undo the self in order to put the self together, back together again in a way that is kind of more capacious, more like caring, self-caring too, right? Anyway, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
I agree with what you said on self medication and all, but I don't think it's when I say it, I don't think it's necessarily in the same way that it's usually said, like self-medicating is an evil thing, but also as a coping experience. Like um, there's a way, usually psychiatrists prescribe, for instance, antidepressants, and not only as a band-aid to cover your symptoms, but also as something that reduces your baseline anxiety and then allows you to deal with the problem on the root of it. And of course, this can be done in this way, or it can be used as a band-aid. And I also think that these are all valid ways of uh, dealing. And I think there's also a huge comparison between substance use, psychoactive substance use, and hormonal replacement therapy. Um, yeah, hormonal replacement therapy for trans people is something that the health system is not really ready to support you in, especially if you are not interested in these more already accepted binary routes of uh, changing your body and accepting your body. And what we see now is a lot of people just self-manage their own hormones. Sometimes you cannot even access the system. Sometimes it takes 3 years. Sometimes you have to lie and say, "Oh, I just wanted to be a real boy," like your story. And yeah, what happens is most people just get their hormones, sometimes illegally, like illegal substances, and they self-manage and they get information from other trans people that are doing it. And then I'm completely sure about this. In 10 years, someone's going to write papers about it, and maybe 20 years, the doctor at the appointment will let you know that, yes, you can microdose testosterone, and yes, this is how you do it. But of course, it was learned by the experience of people that were doing it way before. And I cannot help but see this parallel between these two phases, where you just really have to self-manage yourself because the health system is not really ready to accommodate this.
Matilda, do you want to add something?
Maybe that, like, yes, I agree. And for the like more informed way of consuming and yeah, self-medication, and like I'm like now not gonna talk about this part, but like about the part of more like numbing emotions. I think like there is a direct effect of the lack of queer socializing spaces with then the amount of consumption in those spaces, because there is so little queer spaces to socialize, and when they are existing, they are in the nightlife, and they are in an environment where drugs are present and consumed, and this this like creates a you know, like a momentum, like one needs to like stay awake during this time, like to experience a maximum amount of activities during this limited time frame, right? And it's during the night from midnight to 6 a.m. you have to meet potential partners and like talk about your life and like share experience with your peers and like have sex and like reflect about your identity and also dance, and all of this happening during those 6 hours time frame. And I really believe that if queer folks would have like more socializing spaces in the society, maybe there would be like less pressure to be in this like celebratory mood, or like this fit being awake, and like this whole pressure, why a lot of people also use drugs to just be in that state they want to be in the moment. So like some sort of a self-control thing that they try to achieve by doing drugs. So I really want to advocate also for more queer spaces, and they can be like include drug use or like be sober spaces as well, and just like spaces for communication. And but they are really much needed.
Yeah, I mean, I would say thank you for saying that, Matilda, because I think that we also need to like not overlook the moments where the pursuit of pleasure becomes like dark, or like narcissism, as in where the pursuit of your own pleasure in this context leads you to completely overlook the people around you and not give a damn about the people around you, because what you want first and foremost is your own pleasure. And I think that's, I know there's a question coming about strategies later on, but I think there's something about actually not shying away from calling out when the pursuit, a legitimate pursuit of like communal pleasure with others, becomes a kind of a narcissistic pursuit of one's own pleasure above the safety and well-being of everyone else, right? Which is common, right? And I think maybe that idea, what you were talking about, of people feeling like they have to do everything, and I mean, you see that here in Berlin quite a lot. I mean, it's like everything. It sounded like a job when it sounded like work when you were talking about everything you have to do to go to a party to feel like you've done it. Yeah, and maybe that there's the cultural pressure, there's a society, a kind of a communal pressure, the peer pressure, if you want, to do everything as much as you can in the short amount of time, and maybe that's part of the things that we need to talk about too.
Yeah, so I was hearing you and thinking a lot in several things. I would like to also to add a concept that I got in touch recently from Simon Clay, that is the, you know, like chemsex's wild self-care, you know. I was remembering about this idea of that actually drugs can be very intentionally used for self-care, you know, wild self-care, and to with a very objective aim, you know, purpose in the discovery of ourselves and our socializing intimacies and so on. And also I was thinking about this queerness after dark, because also from a historical stories, from a sociological historicism, night was also, you know, the dark of the night was always the place for queer folks and communities to you know, to meet and to explore themselves, to create their spaces, as you beautifully said before, and to create also their subcultures. And probably it's because of this subcultural creation and this intentional creation of community, you know, and community care, that there are also specific drug subcultures among queer folks. And this is also interesting and has a lot of potential also to reflect and rethink harm reduction, from a heterogeneous perspective, because sometimes harm reduction is thought universally, like one size fits all approach. And actually, I think that the queer perspective enriches and allow us who are working in harm reduction to explore and innovate and expand, like the way we think about it. Now, I would like to bring another topic. Actually, I merged two of the questions I sent to you before because it made sense for me while hearing you. So I will introduce another topic for our discussion. So drug stigma and prohibitionist norms, both external and internalized, are transversal and prevail in our societies, as you said before. We can also find this tension and the belief that drugs are inherently bad in the narratives of some LGBT collectives and individuals, more, aligned with heteronormative agendas that consider drug use among their peers as something that harms their fights. In this context, there is a real risk of socially degrading and also re-pathologizing queer people who use drugs. And specific is the one that is more discussed and more known. So I recently felt inspired, and this is also in line with something that you said before, but I felt very inspired by a book that I would like to introduce here. That is The Pleasure Activism, The Politics of Feeling Good, written and gathered by Adrienne Marie Brown, a North American writer and activist. Actually, in this book, there are hundreds of exciting highlights. It's a very interesting book, actually. But I choose to read this one for our webinar because I think it's interesting, and I would like to hear from you and to hear your comments on it. Pleasure activism acts from an analysis that pleasure is a natural, safe, and liberated part of life, and that we can offer each other tools and education to make sure sex, desire, drugs, connection, and other pleasure aren't life-threatening or harming life-enriching. Pleasure activism includes work and life lived in the realms of satisfaction, joy, and erotic aliveness that bring about social and political change. Ultimately, pleasure activism is us learning to make justice and liberation the most pleasurable experiences we can have. So now, considering this, I would like to hear from you about the place of drug-related pleasures for queer communities. And also, another topic, if there is space if we have the possibility of creating alternative drug perspectives and drug narratives, alternative to the prohibitionist ones. It's big, right?
None of you want to go first. I mean, okay. Maybe I'll just start with it's maybe like a reticence on. I think I get what I have not read that book, but I think I get what it is getting at. At the same time, something that also worries me, and this is also quite, I think, common in queer scenes and queer party scenes. So I don't think that drug use or non-normative sex practices or non-normative forms of embodiment will necessarily make you a kind of a revolutionary subject in a way, right? And I also so I'm increasingly worried, or like if to talk about pleasure as political, and as pleasure, activism, I there's a lot there, I think, that is potentially political. What worries me is the ways in which people can move from there, pleasure as a starting point, to pleasure as just a political goal, and does, actually not engage with the world at large politically, because doing drugs and feeling pleasure is already the politics. So I feel there's a bit of that, that often one finds, especially in like rave scenes and whatever, raves are political. I mean, yes, everything is political, right? But if we want to take these experiences into the political sphere, we need to actually do something with them and not just end at them. So there's always like, it's always my reticence on questions of, but also like there's this compulsion. And then I think I was thinking, but is this neoliberalism, this compulsion to pleasure or happiness, which can be really claustrophobic too. Sarah Ahmed has that book, Happiness, I guess it's called. Like just like stop demanding my happiness, or like my full demanding from me that I live all my life in a state of pleasure, because it's impossible, and so there's those caveats there. I don't know if so I'm not actually answering the question. I'm just kind of putting some caveats on the thing. So what is queer pleasure in the context of a queer politics and like world making practices, rather than just, which can have a really important role, while at the same time not being enough, if we want to look after one another and like make the world a better place for everyone else. You know.
Matilda or Mark?
Yes, I think like queers can like, yeah, like the political important part. Like I totally agree with what you said, Joe, by the way. Like I see this neoliberal tendency also coming from like just not seeing a bigger picture, or like being committed politically to other communities, or see a bigger picture, or have an intersectional lens also to how different group of people are. Was the connection okay? It's back. Okay, yes. I want to say that queer spaces can create safer spaces for drug use or not drug use, by, for example, having intentions or setting a goal of like exploring sensual pleasures, touch, taste, hearings, like pleasurable experience. It's also a moment to explore one's boundaries and one's preferences, and reconnecting to one's bodies and also to the bodies of others. It allows like a space to talk about one's needs and boundaries prior, and this is something we don't get to experience so much in other spaces. And this kind of queer circle may include drug or not, are really healing, and also impact outside of these queer spaces, have a positive impact on the society as a whole. Thinking of also like a trip sitter, and to like, yeah, create safety measures. But when I come to that, I want to talk about the other question, that the fact that because of the stigmatization and the taboo around drugs, this makes harm reduction difficult. And that the experience consensus has in the nightlife is that often harm reduction NGOs are not able to provide safer use material or prevention booklets, because the organizers state that anyway, drugs are forbidden in this place. So this thinking is like far from the reality on the ground and simply dangerous. I mean, it's like your field of expertise, so you know what I'm talking about. And then it just leads to drug user hiding their consumption, and yeah, will like do drugs in a toilet with 6 other people in the dark under time pressure, with one bill of €5 at a throw for everyone. A typical situation that is just like a high risk situation, not a safe place at all. So yeah, we think that there is a collective responsibility, and that the organizers are not doing a part by not promoting harm reduction practices. So this is something I want to stress now. And beyond the nightlife, to build an alternative vision of drugs, something more libertarian and inclusive, we can raise awareness on the various ways of consuming drugs. And drugs can be used therapeutically, for example, like ketamine to treat depression, or psilocybin for mood and anxiety disorders. And also in many traditional communities, drugs are used in a ceremonial context, and since as long as they exist. And their use is like monitored by community organizers and aims at bonding and also healing the members together. So Western societies have a lot to learn from the use of traditional medicine and its benefit for physical and mental health, as well as justice, like the justice that it brings. And yeah, healing within the community. And so in this context, yeah, the stigmatization of drugs is also a reproduction of racist and colonial views. So it's not only against queer folks, but it's a very yeah, intersectional view. Like it is concerned mainly queer folks, but also the BIPOC communities. And yeah, and you talked earlier about the AIDS crisis and prohibition, so I'm not going to develop on this and let room to Mar.
Great. Thank you.
Mar, we are not hearing you. No.
At all.
Now yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, now yes.
Okay. I was saying that I agree with things. But yeah, something we realized when we opened our own club, like, yeah, we were implementing all these harm reduction and things like open drug policy. Please do not do drugs in the bathroom. Actually, we don't want to create a huge queue. This is super unnecessary. Like, please do them somewhere else. All of these things. Yeah, but then we also encountered some problems, like with police. Apparently, like if the owner of a space is like accepting drug use, they can get a huge fine. They can get shut down. We already got searched by the police a few times. Some of them, like full-on intervention police. Yeah, kind of bad vibe. So, and this is us, that we are creating our club with all rules and everything, and we are still trying to manage this. So I understand why for larger clubs this can be a worry. Then you keep calling ambulances, the police keeps showing up, etc. So I think there are harm reduction measurements that can be done and should be done by clubs. Awareness things, try really to not make people hide in a stall and take drugs. But especially I feel like there's a bigger need for societal changes on this, because otherwise this is a very primary harm reduction measurement. What can you do as a club owner to make it better? But also it's a fix ultimately, because the whole system is built against policing and surveilling the substances. Yeah, like for me, it's completely insane that you can just go to a counter and ask for alcohol, and like there's a specific percentage of alcohol in each drink, and you know exactly what you are getting, and it's socially acceptable. And then other substances are not. And sometimes I talk about this with friends. Like, can you imagine if you could choose different drugs from the counter in this cafe? Like, would you choose alcohol? It has a terrible hangover, does not give you so much. So I really feel like there's a huge need for societal change. But until then, the only thing we can do is to work with what we have, with clubs owners, with people that go to parties, with the community itself, but also advocacy to change overall how it's organized. It really does not make sense to me, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's I always find so there's something interesting about, I mean, I don't know, you do this work. I don't do this work, when we're trying to help people make the choices that are best for them. Be it, for instance, with like issues of consent and drug use, whatever. I think all of this is really important, but it always hits at the wall that it requires, it needs people to be, rational subjects, and it always draws me back to, the 1980s and 1990s, and, the AIDS crisis, and the amount of information, community information, or condom use and whatever. And the reality is not every homosexual started using condoms, and people are dying, and not the idea that suddenly everyone, the community got together and everyone put a condom on. It's a myth, because otherwise we will not have so many, growing numbers of HIV cases until, PrEP and efficient treatment were developed. So there's only as much that giving the right information can do, right? And it's a nightmare, because then what do you do? Because we are not rational subjects. So we like to think that we're like, rational subjects, but we are just like governed by desire and by things that, make us to make choices that sometimes we regret the next day. Because we're complicated as people, right? So what can we do? And you guys work in the field, in the places where these things need to be done. I mean, we can hammer information as much as we can into people, but so I think what I'm trying to get at, and I don't know how you get there, is that what we need is caring cultures of consumption, rather than just giving information to individuals and hope that. So how do you apply the information if you are in a culture of use that just incentivizes, or almost like gives awards to, taking as many things as you want in the shortest amount of time? If that, and I'm thinking specifically about certain kind of, like fag cultures, like gay male cultures, where it's like, dude, you're really a man because you like self-resilient, risk-taking, no care for anyone, and that manifests in your drug use. Yes, you're also a homosexual, but you like, it's this same, it reminds me of, the men in my village in Portugal that would just like drink and to see who the last one standing were, right? So it's really, something needs to be done at the level of the cultures of use, right? Rather than putting the responsibility on individuals to make the right choice. What kind of environments, what kind of architectures, and that I'm really interested in what you were saying, Mar, about, you said at the beginning, trying to have your own space to build caring practices in the whole infrastructure of the space. to build a space from an idea of care. I think there's something there that maybe it's part of what I'm saying. It's not just about giving people information and believing they'll do the right thing, but like, how do you build an environment, a kind of an architecture of pleasure, an architecture of drug use that has that, so that people do it because it's how you do it there. You do it by, anyway.
So very interesting what you all said and co-created here. Mark, you want to add something?
Yeah. That's another thing. Like, we always came from this perspective of giving information to people so they make the best decisions to use drugs safely. And what we found out over the last 2 years that we opened this space is that like we tried a lot of like we made posters about dosages, substances, the curve response, the time it stays in your organism. Like we tried everything. We did talks, we did workshops, and at some point we realized, like, yeah, sometimes people know how to take it safely. They just choose not to, and that's valid. And what we can do, and what we've been trying to do, is to be there for them, try to understand why, try to understand everything, and just accepting it, and then yeah, it also involves a lot of integration in the lives of that person. It also helps that in Lisbon it's more of a close-knit community. Most people like are regulars. You know someone that knows them, so it's much easier to reach this. And yeah, at this point, yeah, it does a bit this work of a social center, I guess, because you see people and then they're going through something in their personal life, and then you maybe know, like, oh, you can talk to your therapist about this, like all of these things that then jump from the night and to the daily life, and yeah, I think this was the most one of the most important things I realized working in this place. But of course, it's much harder in bigger cities where clubs are anonymous. You just go there once, you don't really know the people. And this is a huge advantage that we have. Yeah. And yeah, we also believe a lot in like redemption and taking responsibility on all these things. So we already had cases of someone going to the hospital after an emergency situation. And then they come 2 weeks later and they talk to us and we talk about what happened. There's this whole integration of things. Also with like consent issues, we talk with the person, we try to understand, try to de-escalate conflicts, all of these things that I think are very important in spaces like this.
That sounds, I mean, that's incredible work. That's really incredible work.
It is very inspiring. And now trying to integrate a bit what you said, what you beautifully said. So I think when we talk about drug policies, we are also stuck in this binarist vision of the world. We have the therapeutic and the recreative. We have the risk and the pleasure. We have that ultimately introducing the legitimate uses, illegitimate uses. And these were the roots of the creation of the prohibitionism, as an approach to kind of regulate or taking care of the risks of self-determination or of the, individual and collective willingness to use drugs and to experiment with transgressiveness and risks and so on. And because of this, I think the narrative towards a more inclusive, fair, interesting drug policy would be less, to transcend also this binary vision of drug use, because our society has this tendency to polarize everything in a very simplistic and oppressive way. And yeah, you were also telling about all these tensions about the pleasure and also the risk dimensions. Um, and what Mar was saying, like it is interesting also to extrapolate because harm reduction sometimes is struck in this individualistic and to put the responsibility in you individual to change your behavior, to take care of your health, like to be responsible in a certain way. So I think a challenge for harm reduction would be also to kind of jump from the model of promoting safer drug use patterns to promoting caring drug subcultures, to kind of coming from the individual to the collective responsibility of caring and holding space for the others. And yeah, considering this, uh, and considering your experience and also your knowledge, you already shared very interesting inputs for us. But I would like to ask you, which are the harm reduction priorities of queer people who use drugs, from your perspective? And for those of us, for example, myself, who work in harm reduction services, how can we take care and guarantee that our intervention creates a safe and caring space for queer people who use drugs?
I think this one is for Mar. Not to put you on the spot, but no, you do this. You are there.
Okay, so yeah, I think one of the most important things is that when infrastructures or projects have access to funding and to links with health services and all these things, yeah, this is something that's super hard for these do-it-yourself organizations and groups of people to do, like to even know how to access funding, to know which health services exist, which everything. So I think one really good thing you could do is like just share these resources and like use your privilege to share it with people that are working on the field and like yeah. And another very important thing that we sometimes see in like this when you have like external teams doing harm reduction in clubs or this um, sometimes commercialization of awareness services that we see a lot in Berlin. Yeah, I think it's very important not to lose focus of it really needs to come from peers to peers. It's quite common to see this, that at some point you are so detached from the reality that yeah, maybe you're not so in touch of what's happening or the scene or how you can intervene, or not even seen as a peer sometimes, or seen as a health institution or a policing thing. So I think it's very important to really keep this in mind. Like not only use the privilege you have of accessing all these resources and infrastructures, but making sure that you center queer people in the root of it.
Yeah, I think what the commercialization of awareness services is kind of a really interesting thing. Because it's kind of then at some time, and I think it's exactly what you said. And I've seen it in many places where actually the presence of awareness services makes gives people the people feel okay actually not caring for someone because there's people there who are the professionals of awareness and care. And that is a really kind of fucked up thing because these people are there to help everyone, but then that should not mean that it excuses you from your own care and responsibility for yourself and for others. And yeah, I think there's something really kind of perverse about that, right? Um, so I mean, how to have care teams and people who are there who should be there doing this work, but also how do we make it such that people don't feel like, oh, it's just another service being provided to us. And I'm thinking about, like, festivals, where even like queer festivals that shall remain unnamed, where people go and it's the most, like, they go there to consume, and that includes consume, uh, be provided with cleaning services, be provided with people who serve them food, who serve them drinks, who serve them sex, who serve them whatever, and it becomes this really hard, and awareness and looking after people becomes also like a service that they expect to be provided, and as queer people we should know better, right? And we should know that we should be the people first caring for each other, because we've always done that. There was no one else there to do it for us, right? So there's that kind of wild, perverse thing where care now became professionalized to us, which is great, but also, yeah, but it should also start from all of us anyway.
I think the care team worked together with all the partygoers to create a safer spaces at parties, and that it's not really the message of the awareness team to tell the partygoers you don't have to care for each other anymore because we are here, but that on the contrary, they try to emphasize on like we're here together, and if there is anything you need to report, we rely on you to let us know, to come to us, because for a very long time there was just like no one to go to. And so yeah, I think like it really works together. I don't know if people feel like I don't have to intervene or to do anything because there's a care team. And what we witness a lot in nightlife is also that because of most um, harm reduction NGOs being run by volunteers, and yeah, then like not commercialized, like not paid, like being it's unpaid work, then it would be really difficult to first rely on the volunteers that they will show up. Like this is extremely difficult to organize,
Oh,
and also to require them to follow trainings. So often the awareness teams in clubs, because it's volunteer work, are not trained and are also like not respecting the protocols required to be part of the awareness team. So now our like the way we work at Consensus, the our booths are like held by our volunteers that we train beforehand. But we see a limitation to that, and we start thinking also actually this should be a paid work, and we are reflecting on it at the moment. But of course, like then who pays? Like organizers, clubs will never pay for it, but this is a real limitation in our awareness work.
I mean, they should be paid 100%. I mean, it's work. Work should be paid.
That's right.
Um, yeah, but I think it's also, I think. Sorry, Mar, I know you want to say something. I feel it's people who are less familiar with what awareness teams are and what they're trying to do. So start really kind of, I don't know. I've seen things in places that was like extremely kind of disturbed, even by the kind of expectation that the awareness team will provide a service for you. Uh, in I think awareness teams are like angels that of the night, but for that reason, I should be mindful of them and care for them too, right? You see what I mean? And not just expect them to just be ready and fully energized and just like it's time. It's takes a lot out of you to work in an awareness team, I imagine. So don't treat them as your servants. I think that's what I'm trying to say. I've seen lots of people treating awareness teams as servants. Sorry, Mar.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you were saying. Like awareness team cannot be unpaid labor. Like it cannot. Like it's really burdening. And of course, it's like the least ethical thing ever to ask people to work for free in parties and to participate in workshops outside of it. Like, yeah, that's one thing at Riverside Corner from the beginning. Like, everyone is paid. There's no volunteer labor. You are paid just like you were working at the bar or doing door. And it's like above minimum wage pay. Like, this is something that is super fundamental. And yeah, in this case, like, yeah, having an awareness team as a service um, with people that actually can get funding and then distribute it throughout the community, it's great. We just have to be careful about these things that João was saying of not ending up responsibilizing people. One of the things that we try to do is like uh, when people come to the venue, when they are waiting on the stairs to pay from the entrance, we have someone from awareness telling them, oh, is it your first time? Is it not? Doing all these things, drug policy, consent, etc. And also presenting that the awareness team is there, but also introducing this concept that like you should care for each other. If you see someone sleeping in a couch, you should check on them. If you see someone feeling unwell, you like you should call awareness and check on the person. And like I feel like this really helps to make this collective concept of care. Like we see a lot of people that are not working, checking on people and seeing if they are okay. Like this happens throughout the night. Like so one time I was sleeping in a couch because I was tired, and I'm not exaggerating. Like 4 different people that did not know me went to check in. Like it was really sweet. And I think it's important how you present it to people. Like if it's in a club and you just say, "Oh, there's awareness," like, or if you try to build this communal sense of responsibilization and also like check in with your friends and everything. Yeah.
I'd be like so angry. I'm like, I'm just trying to sleep. But it's so nice that happened. You know, I'm like, can you just let me sleep, please? Just put a sign next to you. I'm literally just sleeping. Please don't wake me up.
Okay, does anyone want to add something? If
I
not,
mean, I'm just
yeah.
hearing more. I think I'm going to this place for the first time in January when I'm in Lisbon. I mean, it just sounds like, and I think it's what you said that because it's a manageable size and there's some kind of 2 degrees of separation between anyone or something, like it's not just, yeah, it's built in such a way that it is the space of the people who are there and who make it, rather than a club that you go pay the ticket and just do whatever you want and go home with no responsibility for the place. I think that's, yeah, I think I'm like, no pressure, but yeah, I'm expecting great things, because I think that's kind of how things sounds like it's how things should be done. Yeah. It's a lot of work. I mean, yeah, and the level of like dedication that needs to be there, and investment in particular ideas that need to be there for a place like that to work. Yeah, it's really kind of inspiring.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
One last thing, I think like I'm really happy that like Cosmic Care is one NGO that is also including the fight against sexual and discriminatory violence in their harm reduction practices. And this is not always the case for harm reduction NGOs and for NGOs who prevent sexual violence. They don't always include harm reduction practices. So I think there is a strong need for more bridges between sexual violence prevention and harm reduction in nightlife, but everywhere else as well. And that to create a caring collective space, we need to train the whole ecosystem of the party. So Mar was saying, the person at the entrance telling the partygoers about the rules indoor, this requires that the person at the door, like the security staff are trained, the bar staff are trained, the organizers are trained. The organizers communicate about the safer space measures, prevention measures that are implemented in the venue to the partygoers. And this, yeah, and the artists are trained as well, and their booking agencies as well, just to create a healthier work environment and safer culture. And at the same time, and to close it, I think, of course, public institutions also have a responsibility on that, and that is not just on us to self-organize.
Yeah, thank you very much. So since you bring cosmic air, it's true that we are creating these protocols. We call it Lilac Protocol, and also a Lilac Protocol that is, like some guidance, some guidelines for us to incorporate, like a feminist approach in the work, in all work we do, and also in our psych-care practices, in dealing with psychological crisis situations, in a way that is aware of the impacts of also sexism and sexual discrimination. And yeah, just also to complement what you say from our perspectives, because I work also on this level of supporting clubs and places to design their safer space policies. I would say that we are in a moment where safer space is trendy and queer clubs are trendy also. And this comes together with several risks. For one risk, these safer spaces or these places are, now probably being visited from people that are not, they don't really have this level of awareness, and maybe they will interfere with the safety or the caring environment that was already very invested and created. And this is something that several places with whom we work say, like the risks and the challenges of the touristification of the cities, of the trendiness of specific clubs, and because queer is underground, and underground is cool. So, there is always this kind of risk that I know you also manage, right, Mar, in your place. And then there is this risk of the capitalistic appropriation of what means safer spaces. And then I advertise my club as sexism free, or a club that is aware or that will deal with sexual harassment. So I'm communicating something from my guests, but my question would be like, what is the protocol behind? Do you have a protocol behind? What do you do in fact? And another question would be, and on the organization level, the way you organize your labor, is it anti-sexist? Do you have labor gender segregation in your work activities? How do you divide power in your organization, and so on? So I think there is also this pink washing and rainbow washing risk, when discussing this. And probably this is something that I really want to say also here, because it's becoming very mainstream. And when these libertarian concepts or these emancipatory concepts became mainstream, they became empty also. So I think we also need to take care of this part. And well, to finalize, I would like to thank you to being with us together today here. It was very interesting to hear from you. You really brought interesting inputs for our discussion. And yeah, I will say goodbye to you, and also to all the people that are hearing from us. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.